Hey everyone! Today we are going to create our first code component in FramerX. By the end of this tutorial, you will be able to create this button and its interaction states. The plan is to use a design component as a base for our code component and create different states for it when hovering over or tapping on it. In Playground, create a new code component file. Notice that in the given example, a frame is animated between two states each time we tap using the useCycle hook. We're going to do something slightly different, so delete the useCycle from the import statement, the hook, and the return statement's contents. Import the Hello Button design component from the canvas. This way, we will be able to use it in our code component. We can add it in the return statement and preview the outcome. My button code component is just an instance of the Hello Button design component. We can change its design using custom properties. To do that, we will declare a set of default values for the properties we want to change in a statement called default props. We need to be able to change the button's text, color, and border. The default text is a string read and download. I want this button to be a ghost button by default and fill it later on hover or tap. For the color, I've chosen to use the current RGB value. You can select it from the drop-down. And added the A, meaning alpha, to set the opacity to 0. Alpha is going to help change the color's opacity later on. I will add a solid border of 2 pixels in the same color, but with alpha set to 1. To pass these properties to the component, we need to add them to the component's export function. Then we can declare custom properties for the component, like width and height, but also import the ones from the default props, referencing them from the previous statement. We will use the default props for the background, label, and border. Let's see the difference. A cool thing about FramerX is that we can expose custom controls for the default props in its interface. To do that, we need to import add property controls and control type from Framer. Let's say we want to be able to change the button's text. Write the add property control function for my button component and add the button text control using the same name as our custom property. Use a string control type for it and add a title and a placeholder. Back in the canvas, we can now change the default value from download to something different without hard coding it. If we want to have a custom property control for the button's color, we can add it in the same way, but choose the color control type and choose an appropriate title for it. Let's see it in action on the canvas. There are a lot of different types for property controls you can expose in the app's interface. See the complete list in the links at the description. Now we are ready to make this button interactive. This time we are using the useState hook. It's not very different from useCycle, meaning it can hold the same things, the state and the function, to change it. We are creating different states that will enable in different situations. Let's create the default state function first. We are going to use the setState function and add the properties we need inside. We need to be able to change the scale, radius, and background. We can use the default props value for the background. The default state is also going to reset the changes we made from other states that we haven't written yet. So we are adding a shadow, moved 16 pixels in the y-axis and having 30 pixel blur in the same color as the button. Copy and paste the default state and set the name to hover state. For this state, change the scale and radius and make the background color visible by setting the alpha to 1. Set the shadow's alpha to 0.5. The tap state is pretty much the same as the default state, except for the background color being visible. Now all we need to do is invoke each state depending on the situation. When the hover starts, set the hover state as active. When the hover ends, return the default state. And when the tap starts, change the tap state. And finally, declare that we want the states to animate from one to the other. Let's take a look in the preview. I'm going to lock the preview to show in this frame. The tap state animation is a little harsh. If we want to, we can have a custom animation for it. We can define the transition in the tap state and choose a spring animation with a stiffness of 500. Let's see the difference in the preview. As we're getting comfortable creating interactive code components, we will learn how to create a simple login form created with code in the next tutorial. If you have questions, or if you used a different way to recreate this example, let me know in the comments below. See you next time!